Tonight's program is going to start off with a short, approximately 10-minute video featuring exhibit highlights. And that's going to be followed by a behind-the-scenes discussion with Alberto Lopez, who is one of our museum educators, and Delvis Njajawik, and Del is the lead biologist for Survival of the Slowest. He'll be assisted by Mr. Keaton Hannon throughout the exhibition run, and Keaton is from right here in Gainesville at the Santa Fe College Teaching Zoo. A few of the animals featured in the exhibit may also make a special appearance throughout the evening. There will be a live Q&A at the end of the event, but the Q&A feature will be open throughout the evening. Feel free to ask questions as they come up or as you think about them, and our guest speakers will answer them as they can. If you see that somebody else has already asked your question, just give it an upvote so we know it's a popular question. We'll answer as many questions, of course, as we can. The chat option will also remain open throughout the event. Please just use it respectfully. So thank you again for joining us, and most of all for being members of the Florida Museum. And now I'm going to pass the baton and let's start our show.
Hello, my name is Delvis. I am the lead biologist for the Survival of the Slowest exhibit. Now, this exhibit is all about counterintuitive adaptations. If you go into any classroom or even speak in front of any group of adults and you ask them, if you had to survive as an animal outside, would you rather be a fast animal or a slow one? Would you rather be a large animal or a small one? Would you rather be a strong animal or a weak one? People think the answers are very obvious, but it's actually not better to be strong, large, or fast. This is Flash the Sloth, and this is an example of an animal that most people think should not exist. This animal is a fairly small mammal. He is the slowest mammal on Earth. He is also the weakest mammal on Earth. And when I say weakest, I mean he literally has the least amount of his body dedicated to muscle, compared to a lion, which is about 50% muscle, or a human, which is about 35% muscle. Flash the Sloth here is only 15 to 20% muscle. This animal, despite all of these disadvantages, has lived for 60 million years. So the main point of this exhibit is that absolutely everything in nature counts as both an advantage and a disadvantage, and we'll say something quick about all three of those aspects: speed, size, and strength. So if you ask people to name a fast animal, most people will think of the cheetah. Cheetahs are pretty fast, but believe it or not, they are nowhere near the fastest animal on Earth. That title belongs to the peregrine falcon, which can move at over 200 miles an hour compared to the cheetah's only 60 miles an hour. Now, is it good to be fast? Yes, it is good to be fast. If you are in a forest fire, you would much rather be the falcon than the sloth. If you're hunting prey, you would much rather be the cheetah than the tortoise. But being fast has disadvantages as well. Something like a cheetah or a falcon burns energy at an incredibly fast pace. Compared to the animals we have here, like sloths and snakes and tortoises, falcons and cheetahs cannot go very long without food, a few days to a week at most. Whereas the sloth here can live off of greens in the wild that have almost no calories, and snakes can even go over a year without food. So although they have disadvantages, being slow comes with a lot of advantages as well. Flash the Sloth here eats a type of commercial diet called Missouri leaf eater biscuits, which are filled with all of the plant proteins, all of the plant proteins that he would normally find in the wild. In addition to that, he gets lots of fresh food, including kale and collard greens and dandelion, and the kind of treats he gets are sweet potato, corn, and occasionally a tiny bit of banana. But the vast majority of his food is leaf eater biscuits filled with plant proteins and dark greens. So we mentioned that this is a fairly small and an incredibly weak animal. I mentioned that only 15 to 20% of his body is dedicated to muscle. So how can an animal like that possibly survive? Muscle actually costs quite a lot more calories than other types of tissue, so this is another way in which the animal can conserve energy. You might also think it would be better to be big You want to be big and strong. Well, actually, big, strong sloths used to exist very, very recently. Here at the museum in the fossil section, you can see skeletons or casts of skeletons of giant ground sloths. Everyone we've met so far has been under the assumption that these animals were alive in the times of the dinosaurs. This is not true. They were alive only about 10 to 30,000 years ago is roughly when they went extinct. These guys were up to 20 foot long, weighed up to 4 tons. Now it's great to be that big. You don't have to worry about any predators. Flash the sloth here has to worry about things like harpy eagles picking him out of the trees. He would love to be very big. But all of those big animals like sloths, giant armadillos, giant beavers, woolly mammoths, saber-toothed cats, they all went extinct around the last ice age from a combination of hunting and climate change and changes in vegetation as well. So big animals might be more safe from predators, but small animals are much more adaptable and safer from climate change. So once again, there are advantages and disadvantages to everything from size, speed, and even strength. People do point out that Flash has very big claws, and you might think this is an animal that could be very, very vicious. Now, sloths are not totally defenseless. They can use their claws and especially their teeth to defend themselves, but the primary purpose of those long claws isn't for scratching or swiping. They're not claws that are similar to, for instance, a cat's claws, whose primary purpose is hunting and swiping and scratching. These guys just use their claws to help eat and mostly to hang from the trees. I always love to watch him hold his food, whether it's a little bit of corn or a little bit of sweet potato. He's getting a slightly extra large treat this morning just for being good coming out for his photo shoot. And we'll give him some greens a little bit later, and you will be able to see him eat several times throughout the day if you come to the exhibit. Hello again, this is Del again at the Survival of the Slowest exhibit, and another great example of a slow animal is the tortoise. One question we do get all the time, is this a turtle or is this a tortoise? And the answer is yes. It may sound a little confusing, but every single tortoise is a turtle. Not every single turtle is a tortoise. Pretty much any animal you see with a shell like this is considered a turtle, whether it lives in the water or the land. But if it's an animal like this that lives primarily on land, we tend to call it a tortoise. So this is both a tortoise and a turtle, similar to how you have 5 fingers and one of those fingers is a thumb. All thumbs are fingers, but not all fingers are thumbs. All tortoises are turtles, but not all turtles are tortoises. So we're going to talk for a moment about the advantages and disadvantages and what it means to be cold-blooded or warm-blooded. We are warm-blooded animals. We are about 97 degrees. If you go outside in the cold today, you are still going to be 97 degrees. If you go outside in the heat today, you are still going to be 97 degrees. This is a great adaptation to have. However, the big downside to this adaptation is that it costs a lot of energy. Your body is running a 24/7 full body heating and air conditioning system all of the time. You have to be capable of sweating and shivering and all kinds of other mechanisms to regulate your body temperature, meaning you have to eat several times a day and eat about 2,000 calories a day or more. This snake is an example of both a cold-blooded animal and an animal that has a low energy strategy to life. This animal does not need to eat several times a day. People come up to us every day and they say, that snake ate today, right? That snake ate today, hoping that that also means that the snake is going to be friendlier. But actually, these snakes only eat about once every 1 to 2 weeks. And in fact, if the snake is well fed, it can go 6 to 12 months without food. That's a great advantage as well. The disadvantage is that this snake can't warm itself up and can't cool itself down. If the snake wants to warm up, it has to find maybe a hot, sun-soaked rock. If it needs to cool down, it has to find a cool pond. So it has to do extra work to regulate its body temperature, but in exchange, it can go a lot longer without food. The animal that most people will come here to see is definitely the sloth. However, the sloth is actually, to our minds, one of the less important animals for people to meet. Some of what we consider to be the more important animals for people to meet are animals like the scorpions, the tarantula, and the snakes. That is because when it comes to cute furry animals like the sloth or the hedgehog, people already like those animals. They don't have as many fears or misconceptions about those animals, unlike this one. This is an animal that people will sometimes be afraid to approach, be afraid to touch, and will think that this is actually a dangerous animal. And this is actually not true. This is actually probably the safest animal we have in the exhibit. One of the things I like to compare this animal to is something like a hamster or a rabbit. If you ask what is more dangerous, a ball python, like this snake, or a hamster or say a rabbit, the ball python is actually by far the safest animal out of those three. The chances of a ball python biting you are much lower than that of a hamster. The damage that a hamster is going to do when it bites you is probably higher. The chance of a bite from a hamster sending you to the doctor or giving you an infection or requiring medical attention is much higher. In fact, you can't even be allergic to this animal, whereas you can be allergic to a hamster. Many of our perceptions about animals, their danger, and how safe they are, has to do a lot more with movies and cultural perception than it does with reality. And we're here to bust some of those myths and go over some of those educational points when you visit the museum.
There we go.
Here we are. Hi, everyone. How you all doing tonight? So I'm Alberto, and we're broadcasting live from the Florida Museum. And joining me tonight, we have Delavis. And we are right now in two different rooms following social distancing guidelines. And we are going to have an open discussion about survival of the slowest. Now, during this discussion, we're also going to introduce you to some other special guests. And once we finish the discussion, we will have a Q&A session in which you can all participate, but please feel free to send us your questions at any moment. And I promise you that we will do our best to answer all those questions, but I will apologize in advance if we don't have enough time to answer all your questions. So with that, Del, so as you mentioned, the sloth, it gets so much attention for this exhibition. Why do you think that happens? Well, in your opinion, why do you think people are just so pulled to sloths?
I have been asking that question for a long time myself. I'd like to think they do have the perfect lifestyle where they do just eat, sleep, and hang out all day. A little bit does have to do with the media. Whenever, for instance, whatever the movie was that King Julian, Madagascar, I think it was called, the movie where King Julian the lemur was out, our lemurs got a lot of attention. The name of our sloth is Flash, and that was actually named by a public. There's kind of a public contest to name him. And the kids are telling me every day how they recognize that name from a movie called Zootopia. So I think it has a little bit to do with which animals are in the media at the time. But even before there were movies that included sloths, we would get this small subsection of the population that would email us desperate to meet a sloth, would cry at the sight of a sloth, would show us picture of their sloth tattoos, their sloth shower curtains, their sloth bumper stickers. So even before the appearance of sloths in the media, there was always a small subsection of the population that has always been insane for sloths.
Now, in the video we just saw, you mentioned that there are definitely some animals that visitors should not miss. Can you, well, actually, do you have some of those animals there with you that we might be able to see?
We do. So we mentioned, one of the animals on the video was the ball python. Now, as much as I like ball pythons, they're a very common pet snake. These are some of my favorite snakes in the exhibit, much more colorful ones. These are called fox snakes. You guys can actually find these in the US. Although our exhibit is not themed around conservation or backyard conservation, we do talk a bit about backyard conservation, talking about native species and respect not just for native species, but for animals that would not tug on our heartstrings quite as much as mammals. So for instance, if I were to tell you right now that sloths were in trouble, if I were to tell you that pandas are in trouble or tigers are in trouble, immediately this pulls on people's heartstrings and people are very sympathetic. But if we talk about an endangered fish, an endangered insect, or a spider or a snake, at best, people are not quite as sympathetic. At worst, people might even say, oh, snakes, good if they're in trouble. However, we do like to emphasize that snakes, that our eight-legged friends like spiders are just as important, if not more important, to ecosystems. So one of the reasons why we think some of our scaly friends, some of our fishy reptilian friends are perhaps more educationally important to talk about is because people don't immediately have a positive reaction to them. Whereas animals like sloths, hedgehogs, ferrets, bunnies, all of those cute, adorable furry animals or feathered animals, people are much more likely to already have an immediate positive impression. So we don't have to do any work to get people to appreciate their importance.
Right. And people, I guess, they also have this misconception that animals like snakes, they're always trying to bite you. They're always trying to get you. Now, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Have you ever been bitten by another animal that's not necessarily a snake or a scary reptile?
I have been bitten by absolutely everything. But if I were to choose what animals to work with, which animals are safest to work with, I would say reptiles by far. Usually the cuter the animal is, the more dangerous it is. One of the areas I have the most expertise in is parrots. If I'm holding a 3-pound parrot like a macaw, that animal is literally thousands of times more dangerous than a 3-pound snake. A macaw is basically a cat with a bolt clipper on its beak and wings, basically with the attitude of a cat. But because it's such a cute, colorful animal, people have no trouble walking up to me and even sometimes trying to pat the bird on its beak, thinking, well, it can't be a dangerous animal. It's so colorful. It's so cute. In reality, it's exactly the opposite. We do sometimes do whole talks about how bad we are at assessing risk. One of my favorite examples, and feel free to cut me off if I'm going too long, I was mentioning in the video a comparison between snakes and something like rabbits and hamsters. Another comparison that I think helps put things into perspective is to think about the country of Australia. People like to joke to me all the time that Australia is filled with all of the animals that are trying to kill us. They have jellyfish, kangaroos that are trying to kick us, venomous snakes, venomous spiders, venomous scorpions. They have the largest sharks in the world, the largest crocodiles in the world. What would you suspect is actually the deadliest animal in Australia? The animal that every single year is responsible for the most number of deaths. Whatever you're thinking about, it's the wrong answer. I've only had one person actually get this answer right, and they cheated. They actually had to Google the answer on their phone. The number one most dangerous animal in Australia every single year is horses. Number 2, cows and other farm animals. Number 3, it changes every year. Sometimes it's dogs, sometimes it's bees. But all of the animals that people think are most dangerous are near the bottom of the list. Something like sharks only kill 2 people per year in Australia. Things that are more dangerous than sharks include falling vending machines, toilet seat accidents, and just about everything, and falling coconuts as well, actually. So people's perceptions about what counts as a dangerous animal are usually very warped. So we hope that encountering animals like these and actually getting to talk to a biologist will help reset their perspective so they're no longer as afraid of animals like these, or at the very least, have a newfound respect for their importance, even if they, maybe don't want to cuddle one at the end of their visit.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree 100%. So to ask you a little bit more like behind the scenes questions. So where do these animals that are in the exhibit, where do they come from, and how do you pick which ones are used for the exhibit?
So excellent question. So these animals come from, again, our organization is called Little Rays Nature Center, and we have centers in Canada, and our home base in the US is in upstate New York. And every single animal we have in the exhibit, except for the sloth, which was actually born at another Florida zoo, started out as someone's pet. So they are what we call rescued animals. Half of these are what we call surrenders. So people, even in the exhibit, could come up to me and they say, well, we have a hedgehog at home. We have an iguana at home. We don't really have time to take care of it anymore. Can you please take it in? These are people willingly dropping off their animals. About the other half are what are called seizures, where the local animal control office, a local SPCA officer, something like that, will actually confiscate animals from someone and then call us up and then drop off the confiscated animals to us. So they all have various histories, but they are all rescues of one kind or another. Now, because we do take in hundreds of animals a year, not all of them have the same kind of temperament. These animals are behaving very, very calmly. They're very well socialized, we would say. They're very comfortable around people. This is not true of all of the animals we take in. So we have to be very selective over which of the animals will qualify to do any sort of public education. And you can liken this to even rescuing dogs. It's no different doing a dog rescue versus an exotic animal rescue. If you take in two rescued dogs, maybe one of the dogs, you notice you take it outside, it's very comfortable around people. It's excited to meet new people. It's excited to meet the new dogs in the dog park. But maybe the other dog, when you take it out, it's tucking its tail between its legs. It's shivering. It's urinating uncontrollably. It's not reacting the same way when you bring it out to the dog park or when it meets other people. Those are exactly the kinds of behavioral cues that you would use to make sure if the animal is well socialized, well acclimated for a public setting like this, where it is meeting other people. And we should only select the animals that are comfortable with other people to be put into an educational setting like a museum.
Awesome. So basically you mentioned that you have people constantly approaching you guys, basically trying to hand their pets that they can no longer take care of. Now, could you share some of your views as to what you think makes an appropriate pet, and what should people know before taking on a pet like an exotic pet like a ball python or a hedgehog or something like that?
Yeah, so this is something that we could spend a whole hour talking about. It's something that obviously we're extremely passionate about, being one of the largest exotic animal rescues in North America. However, I can summarize it fairly quickly, but do so by comparing it to, again, dogs and cats. For instance, if you were to ask me the question, are dogs appropriate pets? You might be surprised to find out that I wouldn't just give you a blanket yes to that. Are dogs always appropriate pets for everyone? No matter the size, no matter the number, no matter how much money you have to spend on veterinary bills, no matter how much time you have to walk them? I wouldn't say dogs are always appropriate pets for everyone, no matter what. People do have this habit of saying animal X or species X is an appropriate pet. Species Y is not an appropriate pet. One of my goals is to get people out of the very simplistic thinking where a certain species is always okay and a certain species is always not okay. Can a bearded dragon make an appropriate pet? Yes. Can a bearded dragon make a not appropriate pet? Yes. What makes an appropriate pet is one that you likely have the time and commitment to look after, that you have an exotic veterinarian that has experience and is willing to take that animal on, that you have the amount of room in your house, that you've done the research beforehand to know what sort of lighting the animal needs, what sort of diet the animal needs. So the appropriate pet is the one that the owner is prepared and well-researched to look after, is the short answer to that question. And I would also say that although these animals that we have are rescues, people do often assume that they came from a bad or maybe even abusive home before. And just say most of the rescues we take in are actually not from abusive homes. It's usually just where life got in the way. Very often people will lose their homes, they get divorced, they have to leave the country for one reason or another, and international laws prevent them from taking their pets with them. Most of the animals that we do take in are actually very, very well looked after. It's just for one reason or another, life got in the way, and they needed someone with experience with exotic animals to give them a forever home, which is what we do.
That's awesome. So pretty interesting question that I was submitted to us from one of our staff was, please ask Del this. What is our pickiest eater in our exhibition?
Oh, that's a hard one. So it's very hard to give a single answer to that. So let me guess, since I have snakes out, one of the misconceptions about snakes is that you should feed them live food and that we would feed them live food. So like live mice. People are often very surprised to find out that we feed them frozen mice, de-thawed first, obviously. However, we do occasionally take in snakes that people have fed very, very, very specific diets to. And for instance, I have taken in a boa constrictor that was 26 years old, and the only thing it has ever eaten is live guinea pigs. Like that's one of the most picky eaters I've ever had. And it took months to wean him off of live guinea pigs. So that's like one particular answer. With my sloths, so I have 6 sloths in my care around North America. Every single one of them has different favorite foods. All of it's diets are like within accredited standards of as what they're supposed to eat, but none of them will have the same favorite foods. None of them will have the same favorite dark greens. Some of them prefer dandelion. Some of them prefer kale. So although we have 6 sloths and their diets are similar in terms of the macronutrients they eat and the sort of overall nutritional guidelines, if you switched out one food bowl of one of my sloths with another, they would be very, very not angry with us, but very, very disappointed in the selection of fruits and veggies and greens. So that's a short answer, but I could give many, many other examples.
So is there a certain time of the day where the animals are most active in general on average?
So unfortunately, because we have such a wide variety of animals on display, there is no one right answer to that question. However, let me give you an answer that that your marketing team for your museum will really love. In order to see, for instance, the sloth in all of its different moods, its sleepy mood, its adorable cuddling itself while it sleeps mood, it's playing around its jungle gym mood, it's hungry, cutely chewing its food mood, you will have to come see the sloth many times. Sometimes he's adorably sleeping. Sometimes he's wide awake, running around his enclosure, exploring, but there's no like rhyme or reason. He doesn't have such a regular schedule that I can say that at 2 p.m. he's guaranteed to be doing activity X. You're just going to have to visit many times between now and the end of the run to see all of the animals in all of their various moods.
Right, and we have 16 animals currently on display, but we also have another set of animals. Can you explain to the audience why we have some other animals that aren't currently on display?
Yes, so not all of the animals do best on display. Some of the animals we have in a behind the scenes room that we're going to use for presentations. As we get past the first couple of weekends, which are going to be a little bit more hectic with the amount of people that are coming through just because of the interest around the first opening weekends, we are going to start setting a schedule for having presentations, and we are also going to change up the animals that we use during the presentations so that people who do come this month are not going to be hearing the exact same educational content as people who come in April or people who come in July. So it's not the exact same experience every time. So we do rotate which animals we use and which educational points we hit throughout the course of the exhibit.
That's awesome. You hear that, audience? You're all members. Take advantage of it. You should definitely come multiple times to the exhibit because it sounds like you're going to see different things every time you come. So definitely take advantage of your memberships. So how about the enclosures? Do they have like different temperature controls? Like, are they all the same?
Yeah, so I was actually just training one of my new staff members today and just giving them sort of cheat sheet for the different temperature ranges for each of the enclosures. There's different minimum temperatures, different maximum temperatures. Some of the animals have to have specific spot heat where it's extra hot, where they will only go to after they, for instance, were fed a rat. The sloth in particular has to be between 78 and 86 degrees Fahrenheit. It needs very specific humidity levels. We have a remote sensor in there where all of our staff will get a beep and a little alert if any of the humidity or temperature ranges go out of whack. We have some of the animals need, like the sloth needs UVA and UVB and UVC in its enclosure, plus a lot of infrared heat. So yeah, between all of the different animals, all the different wavelengths of different light that it needs, the sleep and day cycle, so the diurnal cycle to match its behavior in the wild, all of that is tailored to the specific species. So it's not as simple, and this is a good lesson for anyone who might want to have an exotic pet in the future. It's not as simple as generic animal put into a generic enclosure. They all have very specific lighting, heat, humidity requirements, even substrate requirements, and which furnishings and plants and anything else, any other objects you put in their enclosure, which are safe and not safe to put in. So there's a lot of knowledge that goes into properly caring for all of these animals.
Right. It sounds like you guys have lots of sense. Oh, go ahead. Yeah. You have another guest with you there?
Oh, we have a couple more.
Ooh.
So this, he's a little rolled up right now. There we go. He's a little bit of a substrate in it. I don't know if you guys can see on the camera. So this is our hedgehog just waking up a little bit. Now, by the way, we do get asked all the time what the names of the animals are. Because we do take in about 700 to 800 animals per year, they all have numbers and designations in our animal care software. Not all of them have official names. And I actually like that because as we have our guests come in for the first few weeks, you guys can actually name some of the animals. If there are any names that are particularly good, that the staff really like, any names that particularly stick, you guys can come in and you could actually be the one to name some of these animals. I do have one little rule that no cliche names.
No
So I do
Sonic.
try to have no cliche names for the animals. So if there's like an albino snake, people always want to name it marshmallow or banana or buttercup or some sort of like yellow themed food. So we try to stay away from cliche names, but that's my only rule. Apart from that, any sort of names you have for any of the animals, this one is actually one of our most recent hedgehog rescues, only came in about 6 months ago in New York. And he's actually, for a hedgehog, very, very outgoing. So normally, well, not normally, I should say, about half the time hedgehogs will stay in a ball the whole time. This hedgehog uncurls very, very quickly and is quite eager to explore. So I'm very excited to start using these guys this guy for my presentations, but he doesn't yet have an official name. So if any of your guests are eager to give this guy a name, we'll be more than happy to hear what your suggestions are when you come and visit.
Do you guys have like an approximate age for that guy there, for the hedgehog?
So we know he's under 2 years old, but that's just based off of doing a physical for him. But it's a very good question because most animals don't age like we do. So if you look at me, you can tell that I'm not 4 years old. And hopefully you can tell that I'm not 70 years old. But that's not true of most animals. So if you look at generally any birds or any reptiles, once they become adults pretty much look like adults. A 5-year-old ball python, a 25-year-old ball python, a 35-year-old ball python will essentially look the same. Once they get extremely old and you see evidence of some like cataracts, you can see some signs of extreme aging. But because these animals are mostly rescues, we don't know definite ages or definite histories for them. We can tell adult versus non-adult. We can tell male versus female, although depending on the animal, that could be harder or easier depending on the particular species. But yeah, because they're rescues, exact ages on most of the animals are unknown.
I see. And, you know, I was wondering too, like, you know, you mentioned that we have different enclosures and lots of sensors and things like that. And maybe for an animal like a sloth who is very slow, you know, but for an animal like snakes and the other reptiles, have you ever had a case where you had an escape artist and someone trying to get out of their enclosure?
Oh, all the time. So snakes are actually famously escape artists, not because they actually go very fast, but they will very diligently push on every single corner of the enclosure. Every single person who has ever known, who has ever taken care of snakes, or any zoological facility or any museum with an animal collection that has ever taken care of snakes, has always had, or at some point, a snake escape. So we do have protocols at the start and end of the day where we double check every enclosure. You can't just see that it's locked. You actually have to pull on every single door to make sure that it's locked. Snakes are probably the #1 animal that we're extra paranoid about because they are famously escape artists. But again, not because they're fast, just because they will diligently push on every single seam of the enclosure. They don't tend to stay in the middle of their enclosure. They will push on every single seam, every single corner. So if there's anything that'll give way, they will absolutely find it over time.
Well, and since we're talking about snakes, I do have one question here from the audience that we should probably answer or try to answer now is, do you have an idea of what's the lifespan of a ball python?
So we do. Let me just say the concept of we said lifespan. Sometimes the term that people use is life expectancy. And in the scientific world, there's a difference between how we use the term life expectancy in the scientific world versus how it's used colloquially. In the scientific world, the term life expectancy is actually meaningless unless it's followed by at age something. And just to give you an idea of how complicated this can be, the life expectancy of a wild snake at age 0, say at birth, is very, very different than the life expectancy at even age 1. So for instance, if a snake will lay 50 eggs or 80 eggs, the vast majority of those babies born will probably not survive their first year. You can sort of picture a turtle laying eggs on the beach. Very, very often, most of the eggs, when most of the hatchlings in a particular nest will not even make it to the actual edge of the water. So even just between the nest and the water, a lot of them will get picked off by predators. So the life expectancy at birth is very, very different than the life expectancy of an animal that has survived its first year and overcome some of those initial extreme challenges. So we know that if a ball python in the wild can get to the age of at least 1, it will live anywhere between 10 to 20 years in the wild. However, it's very, very, very difficult to tell averages. We do know that with people in captivity, the records are well over 40 years, or even some cases of them living over 50 years. And actually, if I can just give you like one example of just how difficult it is to get this kind of information in the wild, and how spoiled we are. When you go to Wikipedia, look up any animal you want, one of the very first things it'll say, this particular type of parrot, this particular whatever it is you're looking at, will live an average of X to Y years in the wild. We just take it for granted that this information is so readily available. But what did it take to get that information? If you're studying, say, macaws, which live anywhere from 50 to 80 years, how do we actually know how long they live in the wild? In order to find that out, that tiny little sentence that you read on Wikipedia, the amount of work that goes into getting that sentence there and getting it to be accurate, this is what it involves. You have to go out into the wild, catch 10,000 of these birds, put a little tag on them, and then release them. Come back in 5 years, come back in 10 years, come back in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. And then after that, you might have some clue. And that's assuming that everything else in their environment is staying the same. If there are any major changes to their environment in terms of how much logging we're doing in their forests, in terms of the impact of climate change and how their temperature might be different over that time, that might skew your research as well. So we'd like to give very definite answers to questions, but I think it's even more important to give people an idea of how difficult it is to even get good data, and how tentative our answers are, and how much more research we're putting in to refine those answers, and giving people in general an appreciation for how difficult good scientific knowledge is to get.
Definitely. So Del, do we have any other special guests there with you?
We do. So this is actually one of the kids' favorite animals. And this is a bearded dragon. Now, unlike some of the dragons you might see on Game of Thrones, these guys don't tend to breathe fire, at least as far as I know. These guys are some of the most popular exotic pets out there, especially reptile pets. So we are asked to take these guys in quite a bit. However, these guys are definitely, if someone is ever interested in an exotic animal as a pet, I would much rather they get something like this than something like an alligator, which we, believe it or not, do take in pet alligators and crocodiles, about 30 per year on average. And we have to say no to quite a lot of others. This, on the other hand, much more manageable as a pet. But yeah, it's called a bearded dragon, and it's probably one of our favorite animals to bring out to people.
Awesome. Well, I guess we've already gone through all our special guests that we have there. So I think we could start our Q&A session, since I do see lots of excellent questions that are very related to the conversations that we've had. So I'll start with this one here. So oftentimes museums are not well set up for taking care of live animals. Example, challenges in food prep, cleaning cages, etc. So are there challenges to maintaining this exhibit at the museum?
Great question. So when we rent out museums, or when our museums or when our exhibits are visiting other museums, one of our rules is one of our biological staff always travels with the animals and all of the equipment needed for the animals' care. We do work with some museums that do have extensive animal collections that could potentially take care of the animals themselves. Even in those cases, we feel it's important that one of our staff who knows the animals personally, knows their history, travels with the animals. So we travel with everything they need, all of the habitats that they're used to living in, all of the medical equipment we need in order to trim their nails, do the diagnostic testing we need, and everything else. So we are very hesitant to just leave our animals in the hands of virtually anyone else. So the people that would normally take care of these animals are ones that stay with them their entire lives, even if they're spending a year at a visiting facility.
Right, and just to clarify, you guys never send out this exhibition without you all there present, correct? Like this
Correct.
exhibit, you're part of the deal, you're part of the package.
Exactly. We are also picky about the educational content that we do as well. So yeah, we're the ones that run all the educational content, which matches what's on the exhibit, and we travel with the animals, which obviously we have known their entire times that we have cared for them. So we do all of the animal care as well. So everything is done as a sort of turnkey package deal.
So I have another question here from someone in our audience. So are any of the animals in the exhibit at risk of getting COVID from the visitors or vice versa?
Great question. So potentially yes. The only one that is a potential yes would probably be the sloth, with a maybe tiny asterisk of a potential yes with the hedgehog. So we do know that big cats can get the new strain of coronavirus. We do know that there's been some primates confirmed with it. However, something that I try to educate people about with infection control in general and coronaviruses in general. The reason we call it a novel coronavirus is because coronaviruses are a very large group of viruses. There are, in fact, and some of the people on this live stream might have heard of canine coronavirus, feline coronavirus, or might have heard of coronaviruses before this particular COVID pandemic. In fact, if you ever get a cold, colds are primarily caused by three groups of viruses, including rhinoviruses, adenoviruses, and coronaviruses. So there have been lots of coronavirus strains out there before COVID-19, and there have even been specific ones that are specifically canine versions of coronaviruses and feline versions of coronaviruses. Now, that said, as far as we know, and the latest CDC research indicates that although some animals, and it's only other mammals who could potentially get COVID-19, although there are ones that could potentially get COVID-19, none of them are significant transmitters of COVID-19. There is one potential exception to that, and that's an animal called a mink. And have you ever heard of a mink? It's like similar to a ferret. It's in the weasel family. And there are some talks in Europe about potentially doing some culling of mink and mink farms, because that is the only potential animal we know currently that could potentially be a significant zoonotic vector. Nonetheless, we are being hands-off with all of the exhibits, including ours, just because we don't even want our staff getting too close to the visitors. So we are, of course, maintaining masking and 6-foot distance between us and other members of the public. And we are currently not allowing any touching between animals, because even if an animal itself is not a vector for disease transmission, if 1,000 people pat the back of this bearded dragon the same day, this bearded dragon might as well be everyone touching the same doorknob. So we are, in these times, limiting the amount of interaction we do. So we're still going to provide a very interactive visit. We're still going to provide great educational content. Everyone's still going to get super close to the animals, get great pictures with the animals. But until this pandemic is over, we aren't any going to do direct touching of the animals, just for everyone's safety, including the animals.
Awesome, very important. So, you mentioned how lots of people bring in their animals, and some people even take really good care of these animals, really. And the question that we have here is that, since life has definitely been changing a lot for all of us, have you seen like an increase or a decrease of the amount of people that approach you trying to give their animals during these times? Have you seen a difference in that?
Unfortunately, yes. So we are able to take in more animals than we're currently taking in. However, what our biggest bottleneck for us has to do with specific species of animals. For instance, there is an animal that we say no to every single day. And it's not rabbits, it's not bearded dragons, it's actually turtles. Red ear sliders in particular. That's probably the #1 animal that we say no to. We literally have these giant 100-gallon tubs with like 20 of them in a row, each with 20 red ear sliders. And we cannot possibly adopt them out faster than we get requests to take them in. That is the #1 animal that we say no to all the time. So we have seen probably about a 30% increase in requests, but specifically for that animal. One of the reasons why aquatic turtles in particular are difficult to look after is because of all of the equipment you need to treat their water, to filter their water. They are one of the more expensive animals and one of the more long-lived animals, easily able to live over 50 years. So that is the one that we have seen the largest spike in requests to take in. Because unfortunately, we are at a time where lots of people are losing their homes and lots of times have medical bills, and again, through no fault of their own, are not able to either take the time or expense to take care of their pets. So we're helping as much as we can, and people have been, I should also say, we've also seen a huge increase in the amount of donations we get, which is fantastic. But it has unfortunately come with a spike of increased requests to take in animals as well.
Excellent. So this is a very interesting question that I never thought of. What do you do with the poop?
So we dispose of it just like you would with dog poop. We have had cases where universities approach us and research students approach us to collect the poop for research purposes. So most of the time we're just throwing it away. However, there is a lot of good data in poop. We've done lots of studies, for instance, where they count up all of the different bacteria and parasites in the poop. They compare it to bacteria and parasites they find in that domestic species generally. They compare it to lots of actually childcare centers. They'll do tests in childcare centers to see what parasites and bacteria are floating around in childcare centers, and they'll compare childcare centers that have a pet snake, a pet chicken, and so on. So there are various different research projects that do depend on the data that we collect from poop. So often we are donating our poop for research purposes. Mostly it just gets disposed of like you would with any of your feces at home.
All right. So where do you source the animal food from?
So if it is an animal that eats like a commercial pelleted diet, so like ferrets will eat a commercial pelleted diet, just like you would fill your dog's bowl with some commercial diet. A ferret, a sloth, porcupines, all sorts of animals actually have commercial diets for them. The largest company that produces commercial diets for exotic animals that most zoos, museums, and professional people who take care of animal collections will use is called Mazuri. So if you look at a company called Mazuri, they have giraffe diets, special porcupine diets. Our sloth eats Mazuri leaf eater biscuits. Our hedgehog eats a type of Mazuri hedgehog food that's specifically formulated for hedgehogs. So if it's a pelleted diet, most of our pelleted food comes from them, as they're the ones that have the highest quality nutritional chow or pellets. If it's an animal that eats fresh food, because most of our animals will eat fresh food, they'll eat greens, fruits, veggies. These ones we just buy from local grocery stores. At our actual centers where we take care of hundreds of animals, the local stores actually bring truckloads of donated food. Something you might be aware of is that lots of supermarkets actually throw away perfectly good food because it's either A, it's past their expiry date, B, it's good food, but it doesn't look good enough. It's, an oddly shaped pepper. It's an oddly shaped, whatever the type of, it's not a grade A, what they'll call a grade A, in terms of aesthetics, but still for nutritional content, it's perfect good. They will actually drop off pallets worth of that food. And so we actually try to help local neighborhoods, including supermarkets, use us as an avenue to recycle good food that would have otherwise been thrown away.
Awesome. So do the same animals travel to all the exhibits, or do animals get time off?
No, so that is something we're very conscientious of. Even if we're say using a tarantula for a stage show, we will never just have one tarantula. It'll usually be anywhere between 3 to 6 different tarantulas. It's never the same snake that we take out each presentation. It's never the same snake that travels through all the exhibits. So usually, there are different rules for every single animal. Some animal like a ferret can be out more often, for instance. Most of our animals, we have rules like it can't come out more than 2 or 3 times per day, can't come out for more than X minute at a time, can't do more than one exhibit run at a museum per year. So we absolutely do have guidelines that match both the species requirements and the individual animal as well.
Awesome. So let's get a little bit into the science of the slowest animals here. We have lots of questions related to that. So how does climate change impact animals in terms of slowness, size, cold/warm-blooded?
Ooh, so there are many, many, many directions we could take that in. One actually direction that comes to mind a lot, because there's a species I work with called the Virginia opossum. which you guys in the US should be fairly familiar with. These guys are all over the US. However, the Virginia opossum is supposed to live where? In and around and south of Virginia. However, Virginia opossums didn't exist where I grew up in Toronto about 11 or 12 years ago. They came to Ontario, to Toronto and Ontario and all of southern Canada about 11 years ago. Now they're about halfway up Ontario. This is an effect of climate change where we see animals migrating and changing their habitats at a faster rate than we have ever seen. The Virginia opossum is one example of that. Because temperatures are increasing so rapidly, even living in their native habitats is actually sometimes too hot for them. And areas that used to be too cold for them are now opening up to be great places for them to live. So an animal that didn't exist at all where I was growing up is now all over the place. So one of the answers to that question, there are many, many more, is we see migration, huge amounts of animal migration, moving from areas where it's too hot for them to areas where it's now more suitable. This is even a much, much bigger problem if we talk about certain types of insects and arachnids. But the Virginia opossum is one particularly good example of that has migrated thousands of miles just in the last few decades, particularly because of climate change.
Awesome. So this is an interesting question here. I guess people are just amazed with the amount of knowledge that you just have in telling us all this. So someone asked us, what sort of training do you have?
So yeah, people ask me either that all the time or sort of, what sort of degree should I get? How do I get into what you're doing? That could be a whole hour discussion itself, but my background in particular is in molecular biology and philosophy of science. People are supposed to know, animals are not my single or primary passion. My primary passion is actually public science education. I do talks about everything from infection control, public health, astronomy, and various other topics. The reason why animals fit into that so well is if I make an exhibit about astronomy, if I make an exhibit about vaccines, if I make an exhibit about anything else, that'll draw some people in. Nothing will draw people in more than live animals. Live animals are the best bait, the best sort of attractor to bring people in. Not only is the best bait to bring people in, it's a great attractive force. It is something that all ages have in common in terms of their knowledge and level of interest. The 25-year-old is likely to know more about vaccination than the 5-year-old. The 50-year-old is probably likely to know more about pick whatever topic you want than a 5-year-old. But if you want a topic that a 5-year-old, a 25-year-old, and a 55-year-old are both as knowledgeable / ignorant about and are as enthusiastic about, animals is definitely the answer to that question. If you want something that will bring all ages together, that no one is going to be bored by, and that everyone is probably at about the same proficiency level at, animals are a perfect answer to that question. And we use animals as a vehicle to talk about everything. There's an exhibit I'm making soon that's all about animals and technology, how we got inspiration for sonar from animals like bats and dolphins, how we're using things like gecko pads to develop new technologies for scaling walls, for instance. And there are, another example is we're looking at the structure of owl feathers as ways of changing the materials we use and the shape of the materials on helicopter blades, for instance, in order to reduce turbulence. So even if I want to talk about something like technology and technological advancement, any way that we can crowbar animals into that is a way that we can draw more people to that subject because of people's near universal love for animals.
All right, so we got about 4 minutes left, Del, here. So let's try to do a lightning round here and try to answer some questions as quick as we
answering
can.
questions quickly. I have way too much to say. It's hard to shut me up.
Let's see. Do you have a favorite animal from the exhibit?
No. So actually, that's a question I get all the time, but there's no single favorite animal. My favorite animals are the ones where the distance between reality and public perception is the biggest. So again, tarantulas. Tons of misconceptions. People have very bad attitudes about them. So there's a huge amount of room for, huge amount of opportunity for education. Snakes, huge amount of opportunity for education. Bunnies, there's some, bunnies aren't supposed to eat carrots all the time, but because they're an animal that people don't have as many fears or misconceptions about, there's a little less opportunity for education. So that's my quick answer. The animals,
All
the
right.
most misconceptions.
So, is there any negative impact on the animals to not have any natural sunlight, or do they get a chance to go outside?
No, so that's a very, very important question. There's absolutely a huge impact for not having specific wavelengths of light that they actually require in the wild. If you have a pet chameleon, if you have a pet tortoise, many types of animals require ultraviolet light, which you would normally get from the sun. You can't just use a regular bulb from the hardware store for many animals. So we do have to make sure that either it's an animal that lives outside, or there are very expensive bulbs you get that provide UVA, UVB, and even in some cases UVC. And for some animals, those are an absolute requirement, or they will not be able to digest their food appropriately.
All right, I'm going to make this answer for you easy because this question is a very good one. So I'm going to yes or no question, sadly,
Sure.
because we won't have enough time. Does an animal's resting heart rate correlate with its slowness?
Not necessarily, no.
You're cheating, Del. I know it's probably a lot more complicated than
Yeah,
that.
by the way, just quick, I do a whole presentation where I tell people in this half-hour presentation, you will learn the answer to 80% of questions in biology. And the answer to 80% of questions in biology, like, is this what a species is, for instance, is kind of, sort of, it's complicated.
That's so true. All right, I guess last question. I love this question. Ella, who's 11 years old, would like to know if you enjoy your job.
Some parts of it, yes. So people ask me, oh, this must be wonderful what you do. But if you want to work with animals, you are covered in pee and poo all day long. You have no such thing as a day off. If my alarm goes off on my phone that if there's an evacuation scenario, there's a hurricane, one of the temperatures of my enclosure, I have to go in at 3 a.m. The animal welfare is our #1 priority. So you can't be taken away from animals. You always have to be on call. You always have to be willing to pick up poop. And all of that is absolutely worth it, though, to get to work with these animals and do great public science education, because nothing sort of lights up my face more and lights up other people's faces more than getting great educational impact and the opportunity to meet animals like these.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Del, for this awesome treat. And I'm sure we will see you around the museum. And thank you, everyone, for attending tonight. This has been awesome. I hope you enjoyed all these cool animals that we brought out. And please, please do make sure to come and visit the museum more than once. Please come and visit us many, many times.
We need help finding those missing tarantulas, so please come help us.
Yeah, those escaping animals, you can help us find them. But no, anyway, I mean, you heard Del. I mean, every time you guys come, you will probably have a different experience. So please do make sure to come and visit us as many times as you can. And of course, remember, keeping social distancing guidelines and being safe. We are certainly doing the best that we can to offer a safe environment for all of you to enjoy this exhibit. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. Bye-bye, guys.